There you go.
Wow. That was amazing. Thank you. I love this sound like some kind of whole tone Holdsworth sign in there at the end.
You know what inspired me to do that? I was listening on a train platform to your Riff Raff podcast with Alan Hines, who I've never really checked out. I'm definitely, and you were talking about some diminished liquor, so when he played something, I thought I must take that down. I thought I haven't got time to take it down, but I need to do a little fill at the end of Shane Tune. So I thought I'm going to go for this diminished thing, and I thought
demolished.
I definitely demolished. Yeah. Listen, Matt, thank you so much for taking the time to do this.
Yeah, man. Thanks for your patience. And
thank you. I mean, really been looking forward to it for so many reasons. I promise not to bang on about Live from Daryl's House too much, because I'm sure everybody asks you about that. But before we talk about anything else, I guess the burning issue is the Dr. John CD, which I was really saddened to read that story, that the estate have changed the record since you had your hands on it. But having played it, I mean, it must be great to have that document of that association with somebody not just iconic, but just one of the leading lights of that kind of music. But I just wonder what your overall lasting feeling about that is, really.
Unfortunately, it's tainted at this point for me. It's sort of bittersweet for a lot of reasons, and it's hard to sort of talk about the story without coming off as, well, it's kind of bitter. I mean, I don't want to come off as it wasn't my record. It was Dr. John's record. I get that. I mean, for your listeners, I worked on this record with him, put it together with him. It was a lot of work. It took over a year from scratch. Got the record deal at the end with Rounder. It was ready to go when Mac was alive. And after he died, it's amazing what happens in the music business. And so things were changed, which they had every legal right to do so. It's just not quite the narrative that's coming out. It's not exactly what happened, I saw something this morning where it said that the record wasn't mastered in his lifetime because he wanted to make changes, which is absolutely not true, because I had the record mastered in New York. I was there and he paid for it. I have, it was done. So there's a lot of things like that. And I wasn't asked to participate in any of the liner notes, anything, even though I was the only one there the whole time. I wrote some of the songs and I'm reading about what the songs are supposed to be about. I'm like, it's complete bullshit. You guys weren't even there. You're writing about this. So, having said that, it's his last record, which it wasn't supposed to be, and he's one of the all-time greats of New Orleans music. He's a legend. So I'm very blessed to have worked alongside of him and helped him see that project through. And I'm proud of some of the record, Yeah. Like, the track Gilded Splinters was originally recorded. I have the work demo that we did at my studio, and it was a really great stripped down acoustic, and you can hear Max saying, "What's that?" We started, I see it's just a riff. It was just a work production. And then I built it into the track, and then Ricky Lee Jones sang on it. It just became a really magical, cool track. It just oozed. When you're going to redo that song, I don't know if you ever hear the original, you really got to know it's got to have something to say. Otherwise, what's the point? It's like,
that's an iconic,
like redoing a Beatles song. Like, what's the point? You're going to do something different with it. That's, you're never going to be better. So, but I felt like we had tapped into that, and it definitely raised the hair on your arm when you'd hear it. And Mac loved it. And, the story I've heard is that, they didn't like Ricky Lee Jones. So she was stripped off of the record, that version. And Ricky was mad because she called me and she was upset about it. And she wanted to buy that track for herself. And they said no. So after that, they couldn't agree. Ricky basically said, I don't want to be involved in it at all. So take me off the whole record. So then she was off of 3 tracks. Wow. So that left a giant void. And, it's unfortunate. The track End of the Line, Traveling Wilburys tune, that was supposed to have Randy Newman on it, and we had reached out to Ringo Starr. There were people that had a connection to Mac. Mac had worked on their records, lifelong friends, but I was cut off from finishing. So over a weekend in Nashville, the record was finished without my knowledge, and they brought in a country singer on Rounder Records to finish it, who's great, but no connection to Mac. Yeah. And even the label was like, well, why are we doing this? But yeah, so it's bittersweet. And sorry to start your podcast with such a, but that's the reality of the music business, folks, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. Oh man, I was sad for you, but I'm really sad that we don't get to hear that with Ringo Starr. I mean, nobody's ever played like him. And Randy Newman, man. I mean,
well, Randy had agreed to do it. It was just a matter of, getting him on there. And then, but my control was then, the reins were snatched away. So Mac was gone. So I couldn't see it through the way we had really talked about it. But Aaron Neville's still on there. I had reached out to Aaron because he and Mac had been friends since they were 15 years old. So I just went over to Aaron's house and got his vocal on there. So everybody originally on the record meant something to Mac, you know?
Yeah.
Anyway, so that's the story with that.
Yeah, oh man, I'd love to have heard that original version of Walking Gilded Splinters. That's a precious song to a lot of people, I know.
Well, I could play it for you, but then I'd probably get sued, so we probably shouldn't do that.
It's not worth it. It's just not worth it.
Yeah.
On that record, then, so I read, I think it was in that article you guys sent me, Rolling Stone. So Mac being so ill, you had to go to his house and record him remotely. Is that how that? Did it all work like that?
No, it didn't all work like that. Originally, it was done in the traditional sense of where we did pre-production at my studio. And then we went into a real proper studio and brought in musicians. And we recorded over, there were 2 separate sessions consisting of 2 days each session. So it was a total of 4 real tracking days at a real deal studio. And then he got sick. This was in the December of 2017, I believe it was. And he got sick and was hospitalized for a while. So the record was on indefinite hold. And we didn't start working on it again until March or April of that next year. And then at that point, his health being what it was, he couldn't travel. And we had to set up a mobile recording studio a la Rick Rubin, Johnny Cash style. That wasn't the original plan, but that's what ended up happening out of necessity to be able to, get vocals. And I was able to put some other tracks together. But it's probably 50-50, some of it was done in a real studio and some of it was, the tracks were put together with Mac at his house and in my studio and things. But yeah, he was around for all of that.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think most people who know your stuff know that you're a New Orleans native. That's in your blood. So how long had you known Mac? Had you known him a long, long time?
Well, in the sense of, you're talking about Mac had plenty of friends and very notable musicians that he had known for 50 years or whatever. I didn't know him that long, and that if you compare it to that, but I knew him probably 25 years or so. Yeah. I had met him early on when I was with the Neville Brothers, when I was in my mid-20s, I guess. And I would participate in the occasional recording session with him. And I did a couple oddball things like Treme, the TV thing with him. Yeah, on and off, I would fill in for his guitar player, whatever. So I knew him in that capacity, but it wasn't until I produced a track for Ramsey Lewis, who we also just lost. This is probably 10 years ago. And it was for one of Ramsey's records. And I got Mac to play piano on it as a guest. And that's when I was producing that track. And I made a few production calls on that session. And Mac was kind of eyeing me, And I said something to the bass player, maybe made a suggestion about the arrangement or the snare, all of that stuff. And I remember Mac looking at me, making a comment going, I think you're a good little producer. So that's where that connection came about. And so we met, and I told him I could help him see his idea of making a quote country western record. That's what Mac, that was his dream. He always wanted to do this record.
Yeah. In the tradition of Ray Charles, I mean.
Yeah, absolutely. It was definitely, that name came up. Yeah. Modern sound of country western music. And Mac was a big country music fan. He loved Hank Williams. He loved Johnny Cash. Yeah. Other people too that we listened to. A lot of people we referenced.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's funny that album's so influential. I played with Van Morrison for a very interesting year. And he's got that thing in what he does too, that from Charles influence, So if he does those kind of tunes, they've got that Ray Charles thing in there. It's an interesting.
He's super soulful, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So the New Orleans thing, I think you mentioned in an email that you just done I know you've got a book out. I must buy that book, but you've just done a thing for guitar techniques on New Orleans style rhythm guitar. I think for people who aren't steeped in that kind of music, it's got a mysterious area. But given that you've got that stuff out there, just a general question. In terms of playing with Mac, what do you think you learned generally about music, flute playing or whatever, or anything?
Well, it's not just Mac, it's that whole genre and playing with all those guys. Mac was one of the greats. I also worked with Alan Toussaint a bit, and those are two of the premier piano players in New Orleans. I mean, I think to answer your question would be timing, timing and feel. Yeah. The way they feel things, especially Mac. He would always feel things on the back side of the beat, And I remember I never thought about it because that's kind of where I feel things too, although maybe not that exaggerated like Mac would feel it. But I remember when I first, when I moved to New York and I was living there for a few years, and I flew back down to New Orleans to do a one-off gig with Mac actually. And Herlin Riley was playing drums. It was a great New Orleans rhythm section. And there was one part of a tune where I made eye contact with, I could see Mac and Herlin, the drummer, and I knew Mac had did this amazing run and he was going for this downbeat on, the next bar. And I played a little rhythm lick and I was going to hit it with the guys. And I saw Mac, like he wasn't even close to hitting the downbeat yet. And I could feel that, man, he's way behind, like 2 behind. And so I kind of placed it where I thought it was back, but Herlin, the drummer, placed it exactly with Mac. And I was going, whoa, it's so far back. I was like, yep, I've been living in New York. So my time had shifted. Wow. And it's not necessarily like I was rushing at all, New York drummers, to me, I've played with a lot of great New York drummers. They don't rush, but they play right on the beat. And it's the precision. Whereas a New Orleans drummer will play on the back side of the beat, and it's more about kind of squeezing it in, It's hard to explain in words. It's something easier to feel. So that's one thing I learned from all of those New Orleans guys, that's just the way they feel time. That's the way I feel time too. It's natural.
Yeah.
I
wonder if that tradition with the New York guys is more that a lot of those guys are plugged into the session thing. So there's a certain influence of the session thing where you might have a different agenda if you're playing like commercial sessions, not necessarily record dates, but just jobbing commercial.
It could be, and I'm not saying every New York drummer is like that either, but I feel like it's more about must adhere to click. This is the click. Everybody look at the click. It's like, yeah, that's a guide, but I know plenty of really amazing, great drummers, and they hate playing with a click. But you need a click for certain things. You need a click track, and it makes life easier on a lot of records I work on. If it's on a grid, it doesn't back you into a corner later on. You can make decisions, you can change, you can edit, you can, it just makes it easier.
Yeah.
most of probably the great records that you and I would like, or a lot of your listeners say, there's no click, and it's different with a band. When you're building a production from the ground up, it's probably helpful, but
yeah. I mean, I wonder if another influence on all that, the demand for a click, is that we're always, well, the level I'm at, which is lower than the level you're at by some margin, but always doing mail order sessions. So people are doing things and they're flying them in. It's a different kind of music making, I think, that. But that's ever present in that kind of way of working, I think. But yeah, that's interesting, that beat placement. And I think it is a cultural thing. I always thought, because I did classical music, but I come from a jazz background originally. I always thought New York guys and LA guys just conceive of music completely differently. I wonder what that's all about. You know what I mean? The kind of, not just the kind of music, but the kind of pace of it all. I know there are LA sax players who play a lot like Michael Brecker, but there's a cultural thing, and it's got to be the same thing with over here in the UK. It's just different, isn't it? Just different.
Well, one interesting thing that a lot of my favorite rock drummers are actually, British guys. I just think the way they feel time, especially the greats that got the stuff from wherever. I don't know. It's a debatable. Some of this stuff, I guess, I'm not an expert on it, but Charlie Watts or Ginger Baker, or the guys. Mitch Mitchell. I mean, these guys were kind of wannabe jazz drummer. I don't mean wannabe in a bad way. I just mean that's how they grew up. They idolized Elvin Jones and all, but they would play, kind of try to swing it, but it was straight. I actually worked with Alan White and Chris Squire of Yes, and we did a tour DVD, and it was a side project called The Sin. And I remember we were rehearsing at SIR in New York, and I remember Chris was telling Alan, there's one section where it was supposed to kind of swing a little bit. And he was telling Alan, he goes, no, it's the jazzy bit, the Steely Dan, it's swing, and Alan he was trying to swing and he would bob his head, and it was so straight, not in a bad way. It was just his interpretation of it. And I was like, that's what I love about those guys, because they took it and made it, it's got a thing to it, where if you get a really, like an R&B drummer and you tell them to play rock, it's going to feel different. Yeah. It's going to have a little bit of I don't know, it's going to be too sweet or something, Yeah. So I noticed those little minor things, and it really creates a feel, it changes the whole dynamic of a recording.
Yeah.
Drums are really, really important.
Yeah.
Part of the stew,
Yeah. I mean, the British guitar players are different, aren't they? It's just the whole thing, the whole blues thing, R&B thing got filtered over here and back out again. So you got obviously the classic guys. It all feels different, doesn't it?
It feels different, but it feels great. It's just interesting. It's interesting. I like the way it's interpreted. I don't have the right words to be able to express it, in the right way without sounding like it got a bit straightened out, but in a good way. Like, I don't know how, and then maybe a couple of classical things thrown in there too. And, the way Jeff Beck plays is completely different from of a real deal blues player, but it's, I think people took chances more with that. They didn't worry about the vernacular and the lineage of the sacred blues, or you're not supposed to do that. That's not blues, Yeah. That's what I liked about it. It kind of went somewhere unique with it, so it's not the same old, Yeah. I mean, Jeff Beck, who sounds like him? It's Jeff Beck. Yeah.
I had to transcribe a lot of Jimmy Page. I'm just doing this gig. I've got a little mini tour of France in a couple of weeks, playing Led Zeppelin stuff, but with an orchestra. So I had to transcribe it. I wanted to get it exactly right, and that was an education, because it's exactly what you just said. Is that taking the blues language, but totally personalizing and not worrying about if it really has enough of those reference points to B.B. King, Albert King.
Right.
It's really interesting. So it all comes out a little bit left field and a little bit different, different
right
and stuff. Anyway, I was really keen to talk to you about that Dr. John stuff. Anyway, I've got to ask you about Live from Daryl's House. I promise I won't go on and on.
No, it's fine. Yeah, sure.
It's interesting to just the ones that I've really there's some of those that I've played over and over. And so firstly, the thing that I notice is it's a hell of a blend of stuff. It's probably more of a blend of style since you've been on it than before. So I'm thinking about things like Cheap Trick, Sammy Hagar, and Billy Gibbons being on it. It's a hell of a blend of stuff. And the OJs. So you're calling on a load of different stuff. It sounds like, I mean, I think, for a lot of people, it would be an absolute dream gig, but it's got to be really a challenge because you're the MD, right?
Right.
So first question, given that you play a load of different styles, do you give charts to the guys or do you say, you're the record, going to learn it?
It's funny you say that because I'm working on that right now because we go back into production next week. No, I give charts to the guys.
Right.
Not all the guys read. And even some of the ones that do would prefer to learn it on their own because contrary to popular belief, and I've seen this, sometimes I read articles about it and people are like, oh, you guys must rehearse. No, we don't rehearse. That's God's honest truth. We show up the day of the show a few hours early. We run through stuff very quickly. But yes, the way it works is I give the band MP3s and charts and lyric sheets. And I get together with Daryl the day before we tape. Yeah. So Daryl doesn't even go, the day before I get together with him for a couple of hours, we'll work out who's going to sing what do you think on this? Maybe an ending, maybe that, or you're going to play piano, or you're going to play this. What do we do this? What key? A lot of the work is done beforehand. By myself, and I bounce it off of Daryl and his manager, Jonathan Wolfson, who's also involved. But as far as the musical parts, yeah, it's Daryl and myself, and I have to negotiate songs with the artists. And would you guys do this? Well, he doesn't want to do that. How about this? How about this key? How about this? It gets very complicated. And then when you're on set, I remember a couple of tapings where Daryl has a teleprompter, but he's looking at, he likes to see his charts in concert key. And even if we might adjust a key a half step or keep it, if he's using a capo, for instance, on, how can I explain this clearly? You would understand because you're a guitar player, but if he's got the capo on 3rd fret, but he's going to play it up, he's going to play that C position up there on the 8th, that G shape. He wants to see that chord as a G. Right. Doesn't want to see it as a C.
Right.
So it gets confusing because you've got that set of charts. I've got the band set of charts. I've got horn charts, which are in a different key. And if we start changing things on the fly, like we did with OJs and I think Kenny Loggins, maybe it gets really confusing because all of a sudden you've got, 25 crew people and they're going, oh, we need to take a break. Shane's got to work out the chart. He's got to change this. He's got to do it, and then Daryl's like, how long is this going to take? 5 minutes. Let's do it. So that's the sort of thing where it can be a little stressful. And then the guitar playing part of it, it takes way a back seat, man. I mean, let me tell you, there's a lot of times where it's like, okay, we got it mapped out. So can I get another shot? Nope, we're done. Next song. So that I never really have time to get the guitar stuff happening, And
killing. It's killing all the players.
I appreciate it. Yeah, that Billy Gibbons episode, that was the first one I ever did, and I had just met Daryl. Actually, just met him a few days before that, and I just met the band like the day before, wow. and I got the gig. I was hired, and all of a sudden I'm talking to Billy and for a couple of days, and then we were taping, and it was, I didn't really know, some of the protocol, I'd done music, MD stuff before, but this is a different thing. So it was thrown into the fire, it wasn't intimidating. It's just, I didn't know kind of how it worked. And Billy shows up with 2 keyboard players. And, all of a sudden everybody's playing guitar and Billy's like, well, he's only going to play B3 on 1 song. And then this guy's only going to play on 2 songs. But of course that never happens. Everybody plays every song. So, so it was it was a lot, man. But that was the first episode I ever did was Billy. Yeah. And so it was kind of a trial by fire, you know.
Wow, you nailed it. I mean, that's really good. I've watched that several times. Fantastic. I mean, yeah, amazing. Your composure, man, you got nerves of steel. Very impressive.
Well, I don't know about that, but thank you. Yeah, I'm used to being thrown into sort of volatile situations. It's happened quite a few times for whatever reason. And so it's not always the most pleasant experience, but you know, you get used to it. Sure. It's like, yeah.
I mean, I want to talk about your own stuff too, because I've been listening to what's the album with F thing on it. In fact, I did.
Still Motion.
I was going to play a couple of licks to you, but I'm not going to waste your time with you. You know what you played. Sometimes I go into that in these things. I talk about some details, but you know, I won't trouble you with that. But it's killing, that stuff. So I want to
thank you.
You know, as a guitar player, I see on Live from Daryl's House, you got a couple of heads. I think I've seen you with 3 different heads. How do you work? Have you got a switcher, or do you just turn up and think, I like the sound of this, I like the sound of that? Or do you mix them during one broadcast? Will you use more than one head?
Well, let me think about that, because it's been a while since we did a taping. I don't think I've ever used 2 heads together on a live from Daryl's house. What happens is that, you know, I have a lot of equipment up in the Northeast in a warehouse in New York, and then they just deliver stuff. So I don't really get a lot of time to set it up and to tweak things. So usually my tech will just put up whatever we used at the last live gig, you know. So I'm trying to think of which one you're talking about, 2 heads. I remember during Kenny Loggins, I had just gotten one of those Fuchs ODS heads, and then Andy Fuchs lent me his personal one, which is purple, and that's actually in the broadcast. I had that. I had a Dr. Z. I mean, it was kind of ridiculous because my tech set everything up, and I was just going to pick one and roll with it. And the director said, "No, leave it all out. It looks cool." I was like, "Really? It looks like a music store in here." But so that's why probably there's 3-4 heads. I think last time I remember using 2 heads on Daryl's house was Tommy Shaw, and I had a Soldano, and I might have had that. I don't remember if it was a Fuchs or whatever. But for live, actually, the last 2 or 3 years, I've been using 2 heads with a switcher, and it's called a Mesa Boogie head track, I believe it's called. And the reason I use that is it allows you to use separate amplifiers with one speaker cabinet, and it simplifies things on stage. Oates uses 2 amps. Daryl was using 2 amplifiers. I don't feel the need to use 2. I mean, plus it turns into a phasing issue if you're using in-ears, and the volume is kind of loud on stage. I prefer to not make it any crazier. So I use that, and I was using the Soldano SLO 100 with the Fuchs, but I'm probably going to switch back to my basement. I have an old basement that I used actually I used it on all the Neville Brothers gigs and years and years and years. And I just had it sort of refurbished, and I think I'm going to switch back to that. I don't like the effects loops as much. I always have a problem. I've been using the amp overdrive, which I like that, but it's at the expense of the effects loops, and I can never get those things to sound right, man, no matter which amp. So it's just not what I was used to, but worked great for the last 3 years. You know,
Killer. What I've heard sounds amazing. So, you know, but yeah, I guess it's different when you're using it. So on what's that album called? It's Still Motion. Is that what the album's called?
Yes.
With F thing on it. Off the top of your head, do you remember what sort of, were you using a range of amps there, or? Yeah,
that record, that particular track was recorded in New Orleans, but I might have done the guitars. I think that was done in New Orleans. Probably half that record was finished at my place I was living in New York at the time. and I was renting this small little place. So I couldn't play really loud, but yeah, I had a Marshall. I had that Fuchs amp is on a lot of stuff. I had an old Fender Twin. Pretty much those three amplifiers were the ones I used.
Yeah.
Yeah. On Still Motion.
Yeah. Great tone. I mean, I was really interested to see, or hear rather, your podcast with John Scofield. I didn't know that you guys knew each other, but that was great, man. When you play together, it was a Little Wing you played. It was a Hendrix thing. I think it was a Little Wing.
Yeah, that was John's idea. He said, "You ever play over the bridge to Little Wing?" And I said, "No." He goes, "It's fun to blow over. You can play over the changes, you know." And that's why we did that. But John used to live down the street when I lived there, and he used to come over, and I'm still friends with him. I mean, I'm still keep in touch with him. He actually gave me a beautiful guitar for my birthday. It's probably 5 years ago now. One of his that's on that record too. I had just gotten it back then. And he used to like that Marshall I had. It's a 71 Super Lead.
Oh, wow.
And John he's like, that's your best amp right there. You know, he loved that amp. So that's I use that amp on, I think, the Cheap Trick episode and a couple of other episodes. I don't like dragging it around too much anymore because it, it's just stuff gets fragile.
Yeah. Well, I was really interested to hear that podcast anyway, because the funny thing with John Scofield, he sounds just like John Scofield. It's really, you know what I mean? It's like, oh yeah, you're doing that thing, and it's just so great. In your playing, I really hear that influence without it being it's not derivative, but I hear that Scofield influence. So I've got to ask you one thing. It sounds to me not just like a vague Scofield influence. It sounds to me like you've listened to, what's that album, Time on My Hands. Do you know that record? Did you check that out?
You know what? Honestly, no. I didn't get into Scofield until much later, honestly. And I know what you're saying. Other people have said the same thing. Other people have said that I, some things I play sounds like Robin Ford, which I take as an ultimate compliment, but I never like really learned. It probably comes from the same influences. I mean, like I was really into Mike Stern and Scott Henderson when I was a teenager. Yeah. And so later on I got into Scofield, but I never really, but I think it's a mixture of the phrasing. I mean, I've definitely copped a few Sco lines, but I never really tried to learn his stuff because it's so him, you know what I mean? It's like learning a Holsworth phrase and trying to use it. It's like, why would you do that? It sounds like it just doesn't fit. It doesn't seem right. You know, it's almost plagiarism or something.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, it's interesting. None of what you do sounds like you've stolen it, but I can hear a bit of that influence. But it's interesting. Maybe it just comes from everything coming together.
It's probably that type of tune. Like F thing is definitely like, it sounds like actually the drummer on that tune, Johnny Vodakovich, is a New Orleans icon, right? He played on, now one record I did have of Sco that I definitely listened to a lot was called Flat Out, I believe it was called. And Johnny is actually on that record.
I remember that record.
So that's probably, Sco has always had that New Orleans love for that sound. I mean, his mother was from New Orleans and he spent a lot of time down here. Yeah.
Right.
And his wife, Susan's brother, was a producer and used to own Piety Street Sound down here in New Orleans, where he recorded. That's why that record was called Piety Street. It was his brother-in-law's studio that he owned with a guy named John Fishback. So there's a New Orleans connection, Well,
it seems like he does Sissy Strut on that. I transcribed. He does All the Things You Are on that record.
Oh, I love that.
Transcribed his solo on that when that album came out. It was a long time ago, but yeah, really, really interesting. What else did I want to ask you? I saw a thing, Electric Miles. I was just searching. I want to see more of Shane's stuff, and I saw you on this Electric Miles project with Randy Brecker. So, did you do much playing with that?
We did probably. We did it for 2 or 3 years, and we did like a run of 3 or 4 nights at the Iridium each time. Actually, Sco got me on that. That was his referral. And that was fun. It was very open, very free, and it was 3 guitar players. So it was myself and Steve Cardenas and Paul Bolenbach. I hope I'm pronouncing his name right. Burning New York Cats, Yeah. And it was a lot of fun. Yeah, it was a guy that had what's his name, Milan, who he had put those shows together, and he used to work for Miles Davis, so he assembled the musicians and things. Yeah,
that's killing.
Yeah.
I mean, did you do a lot of prep for that, or just turn up and play?
Not at all. No, we rehearsed, I think, an hour before we actually went on stage. We had charts, but it was very loose.
Yeah,
there were sketches basically. It would say like, trumpet, cue, blah blah blah, solo, and I was instructed like solo as long as you want. Like even if you see people getting up from their table, to go to just keep soloing. Even if people start leaving, So it was one of those gigs. It was it was fun.
That's like the opposite of the advice Miles Davis gave to Coltrane, isn't it? Really?
Was it?
Yeah. I just Coltrane was saying something like that. He said, "Why do you play?" Miles Davis asking him, "Why do you play so many choruses?" I said, "Well, let's stop playing." He said, "Well, try taking the thing out of your mouth." It's like John Coltrane.
Yeah, that's funny.
Trust me. You just jogged my memory. I did a transcription book years and years ago. I finished it and handed it in of John Scofield stuff. It was just after Groove Elation had come out, and it was like a 96-page book. I'd done the whole thing, and it was before, I don't know if I even had a computer. I did it by hand and just handed the stuff into the typesetter, thinking I'd get a copy of the book. And then I was asking, where the hell's that book? I got paid for it. It wasn't very much money, but I got paid for it. And then it turned out, they were too mean with the deal, and Susan Scofield wasn't happy with the deal, and I'm sure she was in the right. But I'd given these transcriptions to the typesetter, and I never saw them again. It was all, oh man, I can't do it again.
And you didn't have a digital backup of it back then, huh?
Or before I had a computer and a.
Wow, that's a lot of work, man. Whew.
Yeah, it hurt. It hurt. Listen, man, I don't want to take too much more of you.
Oh, fine, yeah.
Really, really nice to speak to you. But I mean, I'm definitely inspired to check out more of your stuff. In fact, I stole some of your stuff. I bought 2 of your True Fire things, and I'm going to steal some of your stuff for my own teaching. Great lines, great groove things. So if anybody's watching and they haven't checked Shane's educational stuff out, I mean, he's so clued up, very clear, and it's so groovy, and it's
I appreciate it. Yeah, the first one was called Rhythm Mojo.
Yeah.
And that one, that's got to be 9-10 years ago now. But at the time, True Fire approached me. They didn't really have a lot of rhythm stuff, and I still think it's a pretty unique. Brad from True Fire, the owner, he tells me all the time it's still one of their best-selling rhythm courses. And then I did another one called 30 Mojo Rhythms You Should Know, which was a ton of work. That one, I didn't just like play the generic James Brown or E7 sharp 9. It was, I kind of made them, not that they're all amazing, but they're unique. Yeah. And they were all like mini compositions. And it took a long time to do that course. And then he told me, just do whatever you want. Just do something on soloing. So I did it the way I think of soloing. I don't know if people gravitated towards that or not, but the rhythm one's definitely, everybody wants to learn rhythm guitar. It just feels good to play it. When you get a groove locked in, it's like keeping a beat on drums, it's addictive.
Well, I mean, I got that, the Rhythm Mojo thing and the solo one. And I mean, in a lot of ways, rhythm guitar chops is going to pay a lot more bills on a lot of gigs. When you think, if you can't put,
well, yeah, if you want to be a working musician, I mean, it's I think it's definitely helps you out. You get called a lot more. You can make a singer happy, make a track feel a certain way, and you can really change the dynamic of a track just by rhythm part.
Yeah. Yeah.
It doesn't have to be complicated. You just have to know how to place things.
But it's one thing I get. I saw the ad for the one I haven't got, which is the 30 rhythm ideas, and there were some killer ideas in there. It's just that definitive statement. There's a friend of mine I used to sub for on a show gig over here, a guy called Steve Donnelly, who played with Randy Newman a lot. He played on a lot of stuff for him. He was a friend of that producer Mitchell Froome, and he was saying something along the lines of, you don't always have to play loads of stuff. You need, if you want to stand out without getting in everybody's way, you want to make enough of a statement to raise it above the level of the stuff that everybody else is going to think of. It's something like that. And you've definitely got that down. It's just, again, you got to check this stuff out. It's killing.
Well, I appreciate it. Thank you. Well, going back to what you said earlier about what did I learn from guys like Dr. John? But I remember Art Neville. He would always talk about a washing machine. That was his analogy, or his way of describing funk specifically, but groove in general. Yeah. And he would always tell me, we'd be in the studio, or we'd be listening to music, and he would say, it's like a washing machine. And it took me a minute to figure out what he's saying, as I'm in my early 20s. But then I thought, yeah, he's talking, the agitation of the washer, and those pauses where it goes, that's funk. The way a part's go, the syncopation. And he was saying, it's not about what you play, it's what you don't play. Right. And that's what makes things funky. It gives it that little subtle ebb and flow, that little feel of tension and release. It's all syncopation. And when you put it all together, it doesn't have to be complicated. If you analyze any of them, and this goes for drummers too, when you listen to all those great recordings, like James Brown or the Meters, listen to what they're playing. If you just analyze the parts, they're not hard at all. They don't require a ton of chops, Some of Ziggy Modelisa's drum parts are not like on Sissy Strut. He's not really playing a lot. Everybody always overplays it.
Yeah.
I have an episode of my podcast I did with George Porter, the bass player from Meters, and we go through the whole thing, and he talks about it. He's like, yeah, no, everybody overplays it. And that is kind of what you're talking about, just simplicity. Don't be afraid of simplicity. Yeah. It's what makes it. Sometimes as guitar players, I watch some guys sometimes on YouTube, and they're great. They got all the chops and they're doing all these 16th note triplets and all this stuff. And it's like, I don't know where you would use that. Like, I would have gotten fired day one with the Nevilles using that. It just would not fit. I don't know. I've never done a session that I could use that sort of thing. It's like showing up and somebody needs just straight rock 2 and 4, and you show up with all this stuff.
Yeah.
It's like, I don't know where you use it. It's impressive.
Yeah.
It doesn't feel that great, but
Yeah. That's the whole tradition of guitar playing in a very bad way. But you're talking about real world music making, the kind of thing that people will listen to on a record, the kind of thing people will listen to repeatedly. It is a different mindset, isn't it, rather than the athletics kind of approach.
It is. And I don't want to come off as like down, condescending towards any of that, because, man, I love guitar solos, and I love really fast guitar solos. And, I don't always subscribe to less is more. Sometimes less isn't more. But if you're talking about being in the studio, building a track, playing with other musicians, usually less is more.
Yeah.
When I'm trying to come up with a part, I'll usually come up with a part, and then I've gotten pretty good at it because I've done it for so long. But on sessions and things, I'll play a part, and then I'll think, what can I do to get the point across with even less? Mm-hmm. And usually that's the right move. Usually it opens up a space, and it just feels different. The vocal pops out. The drummer looks and goes, man, that's working. It's just, that's why the studio players know how to make records. It's a different mentality of playing a lot.
Yeah.
That's where less is more comes into play. But
yeah,
I still love a good Yngwie solo.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, just when I get it together, my wife might watch this on the TV downstairs. She's going to say, it's all well and good you talking about playing less. Why are you playing fills? Or she sang on that demo. She, So, yeah. I got to. One of these days, I'm going to grow up and stop doing that. But anyway, listen, man, I'm going to let you go. But it's an honor to speak to you. And
sure, Andy. Yeah, thanks for having me, man.
You know, I'm hoping Hall and Oates will come and do the UK at some point. I'd love to hear you do your thing in person. One other thing, I'd ask you, Todd Rundgren. Tell me about Todd Rundgren before I let you go.
What would you like to know? I've done probably 30 shows with him this year, doing one tomorrow, Saturday with him. Today is Thursday. Yeah. He's I mean, he's great. You know, again, through Daryl, that's that Daryl connection. And we've done 30 shows. So the band that you see on TV with Live from Daryl's House plays with Todd for an hour. And then we take a 20-minute break and then we play with Daryl. Yeah.
They're great tunes, aren't they? Very unusual harmony and this stuff. Sort of
unusual, yeah.
Sort of stuff, all sorts of stuff. Very interesting. Yeah. There's nobody quite like it, is there, really?
I don't think so. I got to be honest. I wasn't that familiar with a lot of his discography. I mean, I knew who he was and I knew the obvious songs, but yeah, it's really nice to go in and hear how that stuff was crafted. And we did do a couple of days of rehearsals. So the vocal stuff is very specific, you know, the way he hears harmonies and things like that. But he's playing guitar on probably 4 songs.
Right.
And the rest he's, you know, he leaves it to me. And then there's a couple of things where we trade off solos. It's pretty cool. And then Black Mariah and I Saw the Light, and it's fun, definitely fun to play. He definitely has this fan base, that's for sure.
Sure, yeah. I met him once in Australia, just in a hotel lobby, and he was saying the same thing. He was playing with Ringo Starr's band with Lukather. I said, "Man, you should play more guitar." He said, "There's Steve Lukather over there. You know, that's a lot of guitar." I said, "Okay, and he's done the same." Good. Man, I'm going to let you go. I'm sure you got lots to. You're one of the busiest guys around.
Well, I appreciate it. One more thing, if you don't mind, I just want to plug my new project called Le Combo. It's a power trio thing I have with Jürgen Carlson on bass from Government Mule, and this great drummer named Toss Panos, who played with Lukather. Lukather actually called him the Elvin Jones of rock and roll, and he played with Robin Ford, Larry Carlton, a bunch of great people. But I'm really excited about this project. And since I've been in LA, we've been recording. There's an EP coming out next month. I'll get you a copy. And we're doing a Northeast tour November. So it's a lot of fun. There's a YouTube channel up now, Lake Combo, a couple videos up.
I saw a couple of videos. So guys, if you're watching, you got to check this stuff out. It's so creative, and there's so much music in it. Grooves like hell, but the solos are. There's a lot of information, but it's just grooving and singing, and it's all, you've got to check it out.
Oh, thanks, man. Yeah.
Europe with that, man. I mean, there is a scene, you know, it can be done. You know, Michael Landau rather, makes it work. I mean, there are people that come with those people like Josh Smith and
right.
Make it work. There is a scene, so maybe down the road you might want to.
Yeah, maybe down the road. It's everybody's schedule is so hectic, and it's just to even pull this together is. It's hard. When I'm available, Jürgen's not available. When Jürgen's available, I'm not. It's just, yeah. But yeah, I mean, we're all excited about it. It's fun. Yeah. It is.
I will finally let you go. Thank you.
All right, Andy. Yeah, man. Thank you.
I'll see you down the road.
Sounds great.
Thanks, man.
Thanks a lot. All right.
Bye.
Bye-bye.